But catechetics is a great, I mean, you're involved in, what made you get into thinking of doing podcasts? Presumably you wanted to evangelize and catechize?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you know what, the part of me that thought he was going to be a minister and be a pastor,
sure.
I think it's a way of sort of fulfilling that itch. And then really what it was is I think in converting, both of us, Gina and myself, have never been so evangelistic, if that makes sense, you know? And I think a big part of it was before I was like a theology nerd. So like the intellectual part of it was like, oh, this stuff is curious and it's important, of course. But I was always a bit hesitant to evangelize in the sense that, okay, well, great. You're, welcome. You've come to Jesus. Don't mind the mess of picking a denomination and finding a place to land. And you'll probably never fully agree with your pastor and all that. So it was tough for me to think of that. And really just kind of scary of like, oh, well, there's a lot of things about my church that I don't like. So do I really want to invite someone into that mess? And that's certainly still true as a Catholic, but I think just having discovered the richness and beauty and the fullness of the faith, it really ignited something in me. And I've never been so impossible to shut up, I guess, is probably the way to put it. Yeah. Because it was like discovering, because when I studied the scriptures and I really got into like the Jewish roots of the faith, I was reading a lot of N.T. Wright and just consuming everything about the new perspective on Paul and going, this is how we should read the New Testament because it's re-Judaizing this and we're understanding how the Old Covenant and the New Covenant are linked. It's not like this, well, it was works back then and now it's not type of thing. There was continuity. But that was almost like a story about times past and we had to live a very different sort of Christianity now. But then when they come together in terms of becoming Catholic, I mean, first off, I think the continuity is even greater, even if most people don't understand or realize that walking into your average parish, you're seeing, in some sense, something similar to the temple. And when you're going through the Mass, there are so many components that are just like what God commanded his people to do in the Old Testament with the festival days and the worship and, the new Passover. We have priests. There's so much of that stuff. And it was just like, this is the same God yesterday, today, and forever. And everything he did in the Old Testament that was good and beautiful and true is fully present in the New Covenant in his church, in the Catholic Church. Even if the people in your particular parish or running the whole thing are, maybe a bit dull sometimes or whatever it is, or even if they don't recognize that beauty, but they're still faithful to just the sacraments and the liturgy, all of that stuff is being carried forward. And I think that was... It was surprising in that I was in a place where I was like, God is still with his people, but the church, oh man, I don't know how he's going to fix that mess when I was Protestant, because I'm looking at all these different denominations and how is Jesus ever going to get his dying wish of may they be one as you and I are one to the Father, but then discovering that all along, it's always been here. The fullness of it has always been here. So it's not like we've lost anything that we have to recover. We just have to recover the brethren who have maybe separated themselves and maybe re-evangelize the people sitting in the pews that don't know what's sitting in front of them when he raises the host, But aside from that, it is all right there and it's never gone anywhere. And it might, at some points it might be brutally attacked. And at other points it might just be a dusty thing in the corner that most people have forgotten about. And I think we're kind of in between both of those, but it's still there, like Jesus is still in the tabernacle of every Catholic parish in the world. And that was so invigorating to me. It's inspired the podcast for sure. And I think this is just a symptom of me just being infected with zeal in a way,
Sure.
Maybe a little too much sometimes. I think God's going to temper it in some ways. And, but at the same time, Gina and I both have never been so excited. Because we were church kids in the sense that she was in the Navigator, so she was very formed biblically and wanted to evangelize and lead Bible studies, and I was the same way. But there's something different about pre-confirmation and post-confirmation Drew and Gina Lowen, and I think it really has launched us in a way.
Sacramental grace is real.
Absolutely.
And I think, John Paul said he wrote this encyclical Catechesis in Our Time. Mm-hmm. And he says there to bishops, if catechesis is done well in your diocese, everything goes well. And I think that's what you've realized. I mean, far from it being anything you could ever do too much of. It's the key to to the real renewal of the church, to make catechesis and evangelization go really well. And I think it's an exciting place to be because, as you say, you've got on the one hand, you're picking up the whole of the tradition of the church and you're engaging the whole of culture. So it's that moment of communication and you're trying to see what's happening.